Today we're going to be talking about the Temporal Forces set coming out for the Pokemon TCG and what competitive Pokemon TCG cards you should be buying from this set. Usually I separate the video into three categories: my must-buys, my could be a spicy pickup, and this is a trap. Now this buy list is purely subjective and it's the cards that I'm going to be personally picking up for my collection and for my own competitive purposes, but you don't have to take my word for it. My accomplishments speak for themselves. My name is Rahul Reddy, and today you're going to be walking through the Temporal Forces buy list video. I hope you guys enjoy this kind of video, and we're going to be just jumping right into it. Please like and subscribe. Look at Long Neck Raikou. That's my guy. He's Raikou's long lost cousin. So we're always going to start off the video with must-buy cards, and for these I'm going to give a little bit more of an explanation, kind of go in depth as to why I think these cards are going to be good, what decks they could be good in, and then same with the spicy pickups as we go forward. For the must-buy cards, I think we're going to start off with 2 copies of your Iron Leaves EX. I feel like Iron Leaves EX is not a card that you typically play more than one of in any given deck, but there is the potential for decks to utilize 2 if it comes down to it. I like to pick up an extra copy just in case. Better to be safe than sorry when you get to the event. At last minute, you don't want to be scrambling looking for a card. So I like to pick up 2 copies of Iron Leaves EX, and with the amount of copies of product being opened for Pokemon sets, the base rarity for these EX cards should not be more than a couple of dollars. Probably relatively cheap if you were looking to pick these up for EUIC and the format heading forward. I think 2 copies of Gouging Fire is a safe bet as well. I don't think many decks will play 2 copies of Gouging Fire unless you're playing a deck that's built around the deck itself. But I think Gouging Fire could be a great addition to Charizard EX decks, could be a good addition to Iron Valiant decks as well, and it has a attack that just packs quite a bit of a punch. I think this card is just good on paper as a big beater, and you want to pick up 2 copies of it if you can. Now here's the meat of the deck, the stuff, all the 1 prize guys coming in. You have Fluttermane, with its ability Midnight Fluttering, which stops abilities when it's in the active. It's an ancient Pokemon that's basic. I think you pick up 4 copies of this. You don't know if you're going to play 4 copies, but while you're figuring out the counts between 1 and 4, it's always safe to pick up a heavier count of these kinds of single prize basic cards, or just like non-EX, non-high rarity cards, if you can. I think this is a very good card in terms of what it can do, and it shuts down a lot of the format. So I think that the power level behind it is very strong, and if you expect to play against comfy decks and Lost Box decks, it's very powerful. There's the Iron Valiant that has the Tachyon, I don't remember the actual attack's name, but it does 20/20, and it pairs really well to clean up with the Future Box deck, but I don't think you play more than 1 or even 2 of as a tech card in your Future Box deck. So for the time being, I think picking up 2 is a good investment for the deck. I think 4 copies of Iron Crown is pretty much necessary if you plan on even touching the Future Box archetype. It is one of the few archetypes in this format that requires a full grip of Iron Crown to basically get your game plan going. You don't really ever need more than 3 in play at once, because with Future Booster Capsule you can boost up to plus 80 total damage if you have 3 in play, but if you have 4 in play you boost up to plus 100, which Iron Hands takes out most 220 HP EXs and V Pokemon, which for an extra price, that sounds pretty insane to me. Great Tusk, I would be picking up 4 copies of this card because it is a staple in the deck Great Tusk Mill, which is a new archetypal deck coming out that focuses around milling the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck every single turn until they run out of resources and you win the game. It's a little bit more of a fun deck as it is, but I think this card has a lot of potential, and who doesn't love this beautiful face? Iron Boulder, I think this guy's name is I would pick up 2 copies of this because I've seen Future Box lists tacking this card in to deal with rival Iron Hands and to deal with Arceus builds, as well as I think that it is a decent card in Lost Box as well for dealing with the same things, Iron Hands and Arceus. So there's not a lot of fighting type attackers in the format, and this guy kind of fulfills a couple of purposes. That's pretty niche to himself. Then we have 4 copies of Roaring Moon. If you're playing the Ancient Box deck, you kind of need 4 copies of this card. You could maybe skimp on the other copies of Fluttermane, Great Tusk, and Koraidon, but you need to have 4 copies of this card because he is the bulk of your attacks. He's got 70 plus 10 for each Ancient card you've played this game that's in your discard. So basically you just have ramping damage that goes infinitely towards the end of the game, and this card is just very powerful. I think it's worth to pick up 4 copies of Metang. This might be where you guys are kind of like, Rahul, you don't need Metang, you're coping a little bit. And you might be right. I don't really need Metang, but I think it's a really cool inclusion on the off chance that some Metal Box deck or some way to accelerate energy is really good. I think always accelerating energy or having a way to accelerate energy, like Metang, like Flaffy, like Malamar, those kinds of cards, I think those are always really powerful. and so I think that Metang will be good at some point in time during its lifetime, so I think it's worth picking up the Metang and the Beldums. There's Iron Treads as well, which has the ability that if it has, I believe it's any energy attack, if it has the future booster capsule attached to it, it also becomes fighting type, which is a really good one-card answer also into Rival Iron Hands and Arceus in the future booster or the future deck as well. So it's something that you can also explore if Iron Boulder isn't really your cup of tea. So I'm picking up 2 copies of it for myself because I think if anything, Iron Boulder and Iron Crown or Iron Tread, become like a one-off tech in these decks, potentially a 2-off if you want to just like commit more resources to making sure that you can shore up those matchups. So I think it's worth picking up those cards. There's 4 copies of Crydon because, again, like I said, I think with the Ancient Box deck, you don't really know what your counts are just yet, and you have to kind of figure that out. I think it's a very delicate balance of making everything work and figuring out what matchups need which cards. So Crydon is just one of your primary attackers along with Roaring Moon, so you want to pick those up. I think the Baby Miraidon is also really good for the Future Box deck. You probably don't ever play more than 2 or 3 copies in a deck, but just on the off chance you somehow build a weird deck that requires 4, I would just pick up 4. Like, there's no harm, no foul kind of thing in picking up these guys. I don't think it's too big of a problem to grab it, so yeah. Next up, we have 4 copies of Raging Bolt. I think Raging Bolt has a ton of potential. I don't think it's necessarily great just yet, but I think I would still pick up 4 copies because I think this card is really good and has a lot of support behind it, especially paired with Sandy Shocks and Professor Sada's Vitality. Cinccino is one of the best cards I've seen in a long time paired with Archeops, and it is kind of the boogeyman of the format where it just does a lot of damage, has uncapped damage potential theoretically, and can one-shot pretty much everything in the format, and plus it's a terribly cute card. So I would pick up 4 copies of it, even if you only play 2 or 3 in your deck. For one of all the A-specs, I'm not going to go through each one of them and list them and why they're in here. If there's an A-spec on the board, you should pick it up because there's an off chance that you might play it at some point in time. Yes, even Neo Upper Energy. Yes, even Reboot Pod or like something. You might just end up finding yourself in a position where there's a deck where all of a sudden you want to play this card because you have broken something in the format. Something in your mind is telling you that you have to play Hero's Cape in this list, that Maximum Belt is the correct choice over something like Prime Catcher. Drums of Awakening is broken in this list. I don't know. Like, you will figure this out at some point, but just pick up, like, do yourself a favor and pick up 1 copy of every single A-spec so you just have them on deck for the remainder of the format and until they rotate out. They're all H-block cards, so they're going to be around for a little bit of time. 4 copies of Buddy Buddy Poffin. It's like our new VIP pass, basically, and it is really, really good in a lot of setup decks, so I would just make sure you have your full copies, your playset of them, just to play in a lot of decks that are probably going to need to play 4 copies, like Charizard and other setup decks. I don't think you need 4 copies of Cryptomaniac's Deciphering or 4 copies of Airy, but I think both these supporters are very, very good, and I would just pick up, like, at a minimum 2 to 3, and then at a maximum 4. I think just grabbing 4 is fine because having playsets of trainer supportive stadiums can never hurt in case you find that sweet spot where all of a sudden you're playing a deck that requires 4 Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. Maybe you find a broken way to play Guardian. Maybe you have a barrel deck that requires you to find Cryptomaniac's Deciphering turn after turn after turn. So I don't know. I don't know what you're cooking. I don't know what I'm cooking, but I would just pick up 4. And the last few cards for the must-buy list is 4 copies of the Explorer's Guidance card. This card is a staple in all of the Ancient Box decks, so you do need all 4 of them. So this one's not as a non-negotiable to go below 4, so I would just pick up 4. Hand Trimmer, you probably only need 1 or 2 ever, but I'm just picking up 4 because why not? You know, like, it's just another trainer. Heavy Baton, you probably need at least 3 to play your Future Box list, so I did list it as 3. I don't think you'll ever play 4, but I think Heavy Baton is a absolute staple in these Future Box lists to keep your Iron Hands chains going, so you need to pick up a couple copies of this card. Morty's Conviction is another card that is not necessarily an amazing card, but I think you could play 2 copies in a lot of lists and justify it that way, but I'm just picking up 4 for posterity's sake. The Emergency Board is another card that is very powerful, and I think the counts behind Emergency Board is a little bit, like, people are still trying to figure that out, and I think I'm also trying to figure that out personally, but I think at the minimum 2 to 3 copies get picked up because it just slots really well into comfy decks, and then from there you can kind of figure out what you want to do with the rest of it. Mist Energy is another card where I don't think you'll ever play more than 2 copies, maybe 3 copies in a list if you're really worried about something like Roaring Moon and Giratina. Archeops decks can obviously abuse Mist Energy significantly better than other lists and other decks, but I would just pick up 4 just in case, because one day you might just be like, you know what, today's the day that I really don't want to lose to Roaring Moon. I'm going to go to my local League Cup, and I'm putting in, like, there's just one guy who always beats me with Roaring Moon, so I'm just going to play 4 Mist Energies, and I can't lose. So that just might be the day, so you might as well pick them up. Next up, we're going to the Could Be a Spicy Pickup. This is where I haven't really cooked any ideas just yet, but I think there's like potential for these cards. So there's a chance that I'll be picking them up myself if the price is right. I have to pick up cards, unfortunately, on set release because I am heading to EUIC, and most of you will have to do the same. So if you are, by the way, there is a link in the description and the bio for my TCG player link. All you have to do is pick up your cards, add them all to cart, and then open the window in a new incognito window, log in, click on that link, go through the link on the incognito window or anything that has no ad block, and you can check out from there, and it would help out the channel a ton. I get a little bit of a kickback. You guys don't get any discount, unfortunately, but it does help out the channel, and any profits used towards that I will be using to try to upgrade equipment and stuff for the channel here and make quality of content better. So thanks for listening to my little spiel. Let's keep going with the video. The spicy pickups here in this set are a little bit less because there's not a ton of crazy combo cards. I feel like this set is very feast or famine, where there's a lot of really good cards and a lot of really bad cards. And some of the in-between cards are cards like Torterra, where like I think this card has a lot of potential with the Forest March attack. I think 340 HP on a stage 2. Fire weakness is not even that relevant right now. But the important thing is the Grottle searches the entire line out itself. Biggest problem is that all the Turtwigs have 80 HP or more. So Buddy Buddy Poffin doesn't even work for your turn 1 setup, and so this deck gets a little bit worse in that regard. Now, Whimsicott does pair quite well with Torterra, so you have the ability to play like Whimsicott Torterra as just an obvious deck to have a bunch of grass-type Pokemon in play, basically get your board rolling, keep the Torterras alive, and you can just keep chaining these attacks, and I think that's really powerful. Obviously, I think it's very much a tier like 2-3 fun deck, but I think there's a lot, like, I think it could be really, really good. I think Torterra could be really good. I might be cooking around with it a little bit. You guys will maybe catch me trying it. We'll see. Rabska, I think this guy's name is no bench damage. I think that could be potentially decent, especially in a deck like the Whimsicott Torterra deck. It's all like a combo piece. Like, again, these 3 pieces you could pick up together and try to see like, hey, I can make a deck out of this, or you can just ignore these 3 pieces completely and just move on with your day. It's not going to change anyone's minds, but, you know, just get in there and try your best. I think for Alligator is actually pretty cool. I think the whole line is really insane, especially paired with the Relicanth, which is also on this list. But at the same time, I feel like it's also very niche and really hard to pull off because you need reversal energies, a lot of setup, and a lot of really good draw in the right order. So for the time being, I think for Alligator is just a funny deck, but I think that it just doesn't live up to the expectation, or like it doesn't actually do enough for what it is. And then there's the new Iron Hands, which I think could be a decent card because you can hit for 160 onto a EX or V Pokemon for the same energy as an Arm Press, same energy cost as an Arm Press with Generator plus Attach, basically, which could be really good in a Future Box deck where you don't have that many 1-prizers that can actually do a ton of damage. Like you have Miraidon, which already forces him to play the 7-prize game, but maybe you can force him to play an 8-prize game or even a 9-prize game if you play multiple 1-prizers. And Future doesn't have a ton of really good 1-prizers right now, so it like kind of piqued my interest, just in case it's something I want to try out, but I don't know if it's good or not. Farigiraf is really cool because this is a card that can pretty much be slotted into a control deck in like place of Mimikyu, because you're a bigger Mimikyu that doesn't really get tanked by Shred immediately. But the problem is that there's so many things in this format that just go through these like barrier effects right now. Like a lot of these barrier effects are not very strong because a lot of cards in the format go through these effects right now, which is just kind of a problem for Farigiraf. But it is something that attacks for quite a bit of damage, so you could make an attacking Farigiraf control deck where you just force your opponents to play weird, but they don't get time because like if there's a Mimikyu in the active, they have time, but if there's a Farigiraf in the active, they don't have time. Then you have Dunsparce. This guy is just a draw 3. He would be a lot better if the other Dunsparce that stops weakness was still in format, but that guy rotated, unfortunately. He had to go off to better places. So this guy's a little bit worse, but I think this could be a really cool card because, I don't know, man, draw 3, shuffle this card into your deck seems pretty insane. But I guess you have to evolve it up, which is a little bit worse. So maybe like a deck like Goldango could use it, but I'm not entirely sure just yet. These are my It's a Trap. Not going to elaborate a ton. Just going to be like, hey, don't buy these cards. These cards suck. Cool. You got it? On the same page? Let's go. Scovillian, Incineroar, Wugtrio, Gengar, and Scizor just seem like they're in this set because they didn't have anywhere else to be. And these cards kind of suck. The Walking Wake is actually a pretty good card. I just don't think Walking Wake is a good card in this metagame. Like, I think for the foreseeable future, Walking Wake is going to be a bad card simply due to its lightning weakness and its inability to hit more than 240, maybe 270 with the poison plus the Sneasler. But you need to put so much effort into getting all of those pieces, get the poison, get the tool onto the Amoongus guy. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like you're putting so much effort forward to do 270 damage potentially. And it's not even for a double turbo. It's for a double turbo and a water. So you're not even attacking turn after turn like you should be. Like, it's very much hard to chain these attacks, and it's a very high maintenance deck for what it's worth, and it's lightning weakness. So you just have so many things that are not going for you with this card. So I would just not pick this card up. You can experiment with it if you want. I just don't think it's worth. I think the Vikavolt is the other thing that's worth naming here. I think the Vikavolt has its 120 plus 80 for each I think Charger Bug on your board. And that is just like okay, like it's a stage 2 and you're capping yourself at like, okay, the cap is pretty high. Okay, that's a little bit capped on my part, but you can get to like 400 damage or 3. Am I doing math correctly? 360 damage, which can one shot everything in the format. But it's 2 lightnings on a stage 2 that you have to build up, and there's no great way to, like, besides candying up your blip bugs to get where you need to be. So I don't know. This card is just bad. And lastly, in the It's a Trap, there's more Crydons and more Miraidon EXs. Yay! They've just printed like 5 of these cards now in like 4 sets, which is pretty ridiculous. Like, this has got to be some sort of record. Let me know in the comments if there's like a record for more cards being printed, or more cards of a singular Pokemon being printed over the course of like the first 4 sets of an expansion in a game. I don't even know. This is all ridiculous how many like Crydons and Miraidons have been printed. That are just, some of them just are bad. But anyway, they're both Dragon type, which gives us like a different leverage for typing. But both of them are just like absolutely terrible because their typing is just impossible to use for both of them. And I just don't think the deck is, like, these cards are worth putting into any deck. So thank you guys for watching. Once again, if you guys enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. Use my link in the description below to check out with your TCG player cards for Temporal Forces. And with that all being said, thank you guys for watching, and see you guys next time. Peace out.